Carla, and in this video I am going to give you some tips and tricks for navigating the IEW unit number 3, which goes over the story sequence chart. You may know that I'm a big fan of IEW, but I have found that people often get stuck on Unit 3. And the big problem with that is they think, oh gosh, if I'm stuck on Unit 3, I can't do this program, and they often quit, which is what I want you to avoid, because truly this was the trickiest unit in my opinion. But hopefully I can show you how to make it simple and not at all overwhelming. So why is Unit 3 tricky? What changes? And I think what it is in Units 1 and 2, it is very concrete. You read something, you take keywords from each sentence, and that's how you make your keyword outline. The shift with Unit 3 is that you read a story, and it could be long or short, and you take that story and you put it into your brain. And then you need to ask yourself questions and pull it from your mind more so than the paper exactly. And so it's not as concrete of a skill, which makes it tricky, but I do think it's really important, and it's important for our kids because it helps prepare them for the dreaded blank paper that someday in their writing they will face. And by doing Unit 3, it helps train kids to ask themselves questions. So they have, something they need to write about, and it helps them to ask questions, but it still gives them the support of having something that they've read to fill in the blank, so to speak. They're not totally on their own having to come up with a story. So I think it's really valuable when you look at it from that perspective. So when I first hit Unit 3 with my daughter, we were both overwhelmed because, like I said, it's less concrete, and also there was these 3 sections, and we felt like, because we're both very strong A-type personalities, we had a page kind of like this. And so it broke it up into, your 3 sections, which that wasn't so bad. But then there were these questions, who, like, when, where. And what we did that was wrong is we felt like we had to line the questions up with a line here and start filling out the chart that way. And that was a little paralyzing because the problem was it doesn't, in the story that we were doing, it didn't line up perfectly. And so then we were feeling frozen. So I want you to look at the story sequence chart as a guide, and the questions can be prompts, but you don't have to use them either at all if they're a stumbling block for you, and you don't have to answer every one in the order that they appear. They're just there to help you think and come up with things to say. But the better way to look at it, in my mind, is this to help you fill out a story, kind of summarize a story, and looking at it in the 3 aspects of a story. So the goal of Unit 3 is to have your child rewrite a story in 3 paragraphs. And like I said, the lengths can vary on their age and ability, but it really does work for any story. So 1 paragraph per section, and these are your 3 sections. My kind of guiding light at this stage of the game is we do 1 paragraph a week. So each paragraph has a job, and that really helps them focus in on what information is important in a story, because the goal is not to rewrite the story word for word. It's to give them kind of a springboard, an idea of where to start. But my daughter was worried about, I can't fit it all in, and what if I get it wrong? And you can release that worry. The goal isn't to fit it all in. It's to pick some key elements that make the, kind of the story so you can remember it and retell it. So what are the 3 parts? Well, the first paragraph, each paragraph has a job. Think of it that way. So the job of the first paragraph is to tell who the characters are and what the setting is. And so I think a good way to think of setting is not only where is the story taking place, but think of the word setting as a set up. It's setting up the story. It's giving the background of the story. So, you kind of introduce your characters and you introduce kind of where they are and what is kind of getting this story going. So that's the job of paragraph number 1. And you can use the questions if you find them helpful to kind of get your brain juices flowing, but you just make your key words in the order that things happen in the story. So, for example, characters, you would ask the question, who? Who is the story about? And the setting is, well, where are they, kind of when in time and space, if that's applicable, and what's kind of going on with them. Let's set up the story. In paragraph number 2, all good stories have some type of a conflict. It's a pretty boring story if there's no conflict. So in paragraph number 2, the job is to explain the problem and think of it in terms of want and need. What does the character want or need? And what is preventing them from getting what they want or need? Once you've kind of started on, beginning the problem, what do they want? Then you kind of round out this paragraph with what do they do about it? What do they do? What do they say? What do they think about? You're sort of answering the what. And once again, if the questions help you, great. But otherwise, you're just kind of, in this paragraph, describing kind of what's going on with the problem and generally what's preventing them from getting what they want. And then any well-done story, you have a problem and it builds throughout the story up into the most exciting point, and that is your climax. So the first thing that you're going to do in paragraph number 3 is you're going to say whatever the climax of the story was, and then once you've touched on that in a sentence or two, you talk about the resolution. So this was the climax, this is how they resolved or fixed the problem, and then what happened after that. The big question for this paragraph, the climax and resolution, is how. How did they solve it, and how did it kind of wrap up in the end? If this still seems tricky for you or your kids, do a couple stories orally. Don't even worry about writing it or making your keyword outline yet, but just go through a familiar story that you both know and talk about it going through each of the paragraphs. So, for example, if you were going to do Cinderella, most kids know that story. So, characters and setting, what was going on? Well, there was a young girl named Cinderella. Her mother died when she was young. Her father remarried a miserable woman with 2 daughters, and sadly, he died. Basically, Cinderella was a slave in her own home. Okay? Done. Characters are done. Super easy. And you kind of set up the story. So not only where it's taking place in their home, but you kind of laid the foundation for the next part. All right, number 2, conflict. What was the problem? What did Cinderella want or need? Well, she worked hard all the time. She was, miserable being their slave until one day she was very excited because news came from the king there was going to be a ball. So boy, oh boy, she really wanted to go to that ball. She helped her stepsisters, and she was told she could attend the ball, and so she was really, really excited and got all of her work done, got a dress. She was all ready to go. All right, that is kind of the end of paragraph 2. So then you move on to 3. What was the climax? Well, the climax in Cinderella was that she was all ready to go, and at the last minute, her evil stepmother locked her in her bedroom and took the key, and so Cinderella was not going to be able to attend the ball. How did that get resolved? Well, her loving fairy godmother came and let her out of the room, got her dressed, and gave her some magical coachman and sent her off to the ball where she danced with the prince. They fell in love and in the end got married. The end. So just going through some stories like that with your kids is a great way to get a feel for the story sequence chart. And I mean, obviously I left out some key details about the slipper and all that, but that's okay. You just practice with your kids because you're not expecting them to rewrite every detail. And I think once they're released of that fear of, oh, what if I don't get it all in? That's okay. That was the gist of the story Cinderella. And you know, you could go and you could add in a few more details at the end or not. But either way, it's getting them comfortable with it. And I like to do it with short stories. And I also like to do it with some longer chapter books that we've read, because initially my daughter didn't believe it would work. She said, well, this will only work with a short story. And I said, no, if you know, for example, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, we had read that and I went through each of the sections, and sure, we left out big chunks of it, but basically she could retell the gist of that story using the story sequence chart. And like I said, if the questions help you, like who are the characters, you know, where are they, things like that, use them. But if it's easier just to think of these as headings and then to kind of fill the information in beneath those, then just do it that way. Whatever works for you and your kids. So my goal with this video was to give you, the parent, hopefully a better understanding of Unit 3 and how it works, and for you to not be scared of it, because really it is not as hard as you probably thought it was. So just keep that in mind, do some things orally, and if that is as far as you make it with your kids, don't let this be a stumbling block for moving on to the other units in the program, because your kids just may not like writing stories, and when you go into Unit 4, it's back to doing more report type things, and for many kids, that's a lot easier. So I hope you don't get stuck on this. If it's still overwhelming to you, I am going to be putting out 3 videos and walking through a story. We're going to go ahead and make the story sequence chart, and these 3 videos will be aimed for your students, but I think it's beneficial if you watch it as well. So what we'll do is I'll take them through how to create a story sequence chart, and we'll do it on the board. I'll do it with them. They can write it down, and then they can go ahead and write each of the paragraphs, and then you can check the box and say, we did Unit 3, and feel free to go ahead and move on with Unit 4. So you can go ahead and click on my channel to see the links for those videos as well. Bye-bye.